The Galactic Council Chamber, a vast dome of shimmering light and holographic data streams, was never quiet. Today, however, the silence was thick enough to feel. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the quiet of a machine that had suddenly, inexplicably, stopped humming. Counselor Myra of Toral adjusted the sensory nodes on her slender neck, her large, dark eyes scanning the empty platform reserved for the human delegation. It was a simple, unadorned space, in stark contrast to the ornate pods of the Kiltech or the floating water spheres of the Aquar. It was always occupied. Until now. "The session is called to order," announced the Grand Speaker, a being of shifting light and deep resonance. "We note the absence of the Terran delegation. Ambassador Jin has provided no reason for this lack of attendance." A low grumble came from the Kiltech pod. Kiltok Representative Gorv, a massive being of armored plates and cold, practical logic, waved a dismissive claw. "The humans are emotional, unpredictable. They sulk because we denied their request for additional mining rights in the Cygnus sector. They will return when they need something." Myra's delicate fingers danced across her console. She was a scientist by training, not a politician, and she trusted data more than bluster. "Representative Gorv, this is not a simple absence. My preliminary review of the Orion Arm sensor log shows irregularities." "Define irregularities," Gorv snapped. "Human vessel traffic," Myra said, her voice calm but carrying clearly in the silent chamber. "It has dropped to 0 in the last 72 standard hours." A wave of rustling and soft chiming filled the dome. 0 was not a number the Council was used to. Humans were everywhere. Their blocky, efficient freighters carried goods between the core worlds and the fringe colonies. Their sleek, fast couriers delivered vital messages where quantum relays failed. Their sturdy, unglamorous maintenance craft were as common as dust, constantly seen tinkering with the fundamental infrastructure of the galaxy. "Impossible," Gorv stated. "A sensor glitch. Their ships are probably just running quiet. A childish trick. I have cross-referenced with Kiltech deep space monitors, Aquar biosignature arrays, and even the old Veln listening posts," Myra countered, bringing up a holographic map. A network of golden lines, the usual dense web of human transit routes, glowed against the star field. As she advanced the timeline, the lines began to vanish. Not fade, vanish, one by one, like lights being switched off, starting from the furthest reaches of explored space and moving inwards. Within the last hour, the map was dark. No active human warp signatures existed inside Council-monitored space. "This is a coordinated withdrawal," said the Aquar delegate, her voice a melodic bubble of sound. "But to what end? Where have they gone?" No one had an answer. The chamber plunged back into that heavy, worrying silence. It was then that the first alerts began to ping on various consoles. Subtle, at first. A minor fluctuation in the quantum cum relay near Sigma Draconis. A slight, unstable wobble in the artificial gravity of the Kiltech starbase in Sector 7. Gorv dismissed them. Coincidence. System noise. Myra was not convinced. She pulled up the schematics for the Sigma Draconis relay. It was a human design, built by human engineers. Its maintenance logs showed the last servicing was performed by a human crew, led by an engineer Day, just 3 cycles ago. The note simply read, "Stability matrix calibrated. Next check due in 6 standard cycles." The relay wasn't due for a check, yet it was failing. A junior aide, a young Turellian like Myra, rushed to her pod, his sensory nodes flushed with alarm. "Counselor, we are receiving priority distress calls from the Helios Nebula shipping lanes." The Helios Nebula was a beautiful, dangerous region of ionized gas and young stars. It was also a major trade corridor, made safely navigable only by the gravity silk, a human-invented network of field projectors that calmed the violent stellar winds and created stable transit tunnels. It was technology no other species fully understood, but everyone relied on. On the main holographic viewer, a visual feed from a Kiltech freighter flickered to life. The ship was shuddering violently. Outside its viewports, the usually gentle, shimmering pink and blue strands of the gravity silk were lashing like angry whips. The calm tunnel was collapsing, reverting to the chaotic, ship-tearing maelstrom it had been before the humans came. "Where is the maintenance outpost?" Gorv roared. "The human station in the nebula. They must activate the stabilizers." Myra was already checking. The station, a modular habitat called Wayfarer's Rest, was dark. No life signs. No power signatures. Its docking bays were empty. It was a hollow shell drifting in the suddenly violent nebula. The visual feed from the freighter showed a strand of uncontrolled energy, a whip of pure force, crackling toward the ship. The transmission dissolved into static dot. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer just confusion. It was the first cold trickle of fear. Mira looked back at the empty human platform. She thought of Ambassador Jin. He was not like Gorv. He was quiet, observant, often with a faint, unreadable smile on his face. He spoke softly, but carried immense, unspoken authority. He had tried, just last session, to explain something about inherent stability and conscious calibration. The council had been debating tariffs and had cut him short. Now Jin was gone. All the humans were gone. And the galaxy's lights, the lights everyone had taken for granted, were beginning to flicker. Gorv tried to reclaim control. "This is a nuisance. A power play. They have hidden their ships, sabotaged some systems to frighten us. The Kiltech Alliance will deploy our own engineers. We will fix their primitive stabilizers and their simple relays. We do not need them." But as he spoke, another alert flashed on Mira's screen. This one was from the Medical Research Colony on New Eden. Their atmosphere processors, designed by humans to filter out a deadly, native spore, were reporting catastrophic failure. The backup systems, also of human design, were not engaging. The head doctor, a frantic Sulcan, sent a text-only message. "Human biofilters are dying. No one here knows the activation sequence for the backups. The spores are getting in. Please, we need Engineer Day. He installed these." "Where is he?" Mira leaned back in her pod, a deep unease settling in her bones. It wasn't just the ships. It was everything. The filters, the stabilizers, the relays, the gates. The unnoticed, unglamorous machinery that made life in a complex, dangerous galaxy possible. It was all human-made. And it was all beginning to fail, not from age or attack, but from a simple, profound absence. The humans had departed. And as she watched the Kiltech representative bluster and the other delegates begin to murmur in rising panic, Counselor Mira, the scientist, knew one thing with cold certainty. They had not just left. They had turned out the lights on their way out. And the galaxy was just now realizing how dark it truly was. The unthinkable silence stretched into a week. It was no longer a topic of debate in the council chamber. It was a suffocating reality. The humans had not returned. Their empty platform was a silent accusation. The cascading failures were no longer whispers in data streams. They were screams. The Helios Nebula was now officially closed. The gravity silk had completely unraveled. 2 Kiltech heavy cruisers, sent to force a path and prove Gorv's point, had been torn apart. The violent stellar winds shredded their advanced armor as if it were paper. The loss of life and ships was a shock to the entire Kiltech Alliance. Their technology, the pride of their civilization, was useless against the raw chaos the humans had once so gently tamed. On New Eden, The situation was tragic. The human-made biofilters had not just failed. They had died in a way that poisoned their own backup systems. The deadly spores had infiltrated the medical colony. A quarantine was in place, but it was too late for many. The head doctor's pleas had turned to silence 2 days prior. Every corner of the galaxy seemed to ache in a way it never had. Quantum relays, the backbone of instant communication across light years, began dropping out. Not all at once, but in a slow, spreading wave of static. The signals that did get through were often garbled, filled with strange echoes and spatial ghosts. Trade slowed to a crawl. Systems felt isolated, alone in the dark. Gorv, his armored plates clenched tight with stress, could no longer dismiss it as a human trick. The Kill-Tak economy was shuddering. Their military, stretched thin trying to patrol suddenly unstable routes, was vulnerable. He stood before the council, his earlier bluster replaced by a simmering, confused anger. "This is an act of war," he stated, his voice a grating rumble. "A silent, cowardly war. They have poisoned the well for everyone." "What war, Representative Gorv?" asked the Aquar delegate, her water form bubbling with distress. "They have fired no weapons. They have taken nothing. They have simply left, and taken their understanding with them. Their understanding was a trap." Gorv slammed a heavy fist on his console. "They made us dependent on their clever toys. Now they have withdrawn them to watch us flounder." Counselor Mira had barely slept. She had been analyzing the failure patterns. They were not random. The systems weren't breaking down from where. They were shutting down like a body whose heart had stopped. The most complex human systems failed first. The gravity silk, the quantum relays. It was as if a central, unifying command had been switched off. "We need their knowledge," Myra said, her voice tired but clear. "We do not need their ships or their weapons. We need the mind that built the filters on New Eden. We need the hands that calibrated the silk." "All human personnel are gone," Gorv said. "Not all," a soft voice interjected. It was from a lesser communication console used by junior aides. The council turned. The face on the screen was young, weary, and very human. His name was Day. He was an engineer, a specialist in gravitic field mechanics. He had been part of the crew that last serviced the Sigma Draconis relay. He was also the reason the New Eden doctor had asked for help. "I stayed," Day said simply. He was in a small, messy apartment on a mixed-species orbital station. The background was cluttered with technical parts and data pads. "My spouse is Torellian. Her work is here. Our life is here. I could not leave." A wave of intense relief washed over Myra. "A source. A key." Gorv leaned forward. "Engineer Day, you will explain this sabotage. You will provide the command codes to restore the systems your people have disabled." Day looked at Gorv, not with fear, but with a deep, sad patience. It was a look Mira had seen on Ambassador Jin's face. "There are no command codes, Representative. It is not sabotage. It is absence." "Explain," Myra urged gently. Day took a breath. He held up a simple, dull gray cube, a standard data storage device. "This is the technical schematic for a Mark 7 quantum relay stabilizer. Any species in the Council can read it. The parts list, the assembly instructions, the power sequences. It is all there. Then we can rebuild." Gorv declared. "You can assemble it," Day corrected. "It will not function. Not for long, and never at full capacity." He zoomed in the display on a seemingly innocuous component labeled Neural Symbiotic Interface, Classified. "The technology is symbiotic," Day said. "It does not just exist. It is tended. It requires a human presence. Not to push buttons, but to harmonize." He tried to find simpler words. You know that humans have a latent psychic sensitivity. Very weak, mostly useless. But it exists. Our engineers, thousands of them spread across the galaxy, were not just mechanics. They were anchors. Their minds, their quiet consciousness, were subtly linked to these systems. A Mark 7 relay doesn't just channel energy. It sings. And it needs a human mind to hum along with it, to keep its song stable. Without that hum, the song becomes noise. The system tears itself apart. The council chamber was utterly still. The concept was alien, profound, and terrifying. The gravity silk? Mira whispered. A symphony, Day said. A complex, beautiful pattern held in the minds of a dedicated choir on 10 different tender ships. Their thoughts wove the calm into the storm. The ships are gone. The choir is silent. The storm has returned. Gorv was horrified. You? You wired your primitive psychic echoes into the foundation of our civilization? Without consent? We offered the foundation, Day replied, a flicker of steel in his eyes. You accepted it. You enjoyed the safe lanes, the clear communications, the clean air. You never asked how the food was cooked. You just ate. And you called us primitive while you ate. He looked defeated then. We did not hide it. Ambassador Jin tried to explain conscious calibration for years. You are not interested in how it worked. You were only interested that it did work. Myra's scientific mind reeled, but it also recognized a terrible truth. It wasn't malice. It was biology. Human technology was an extension of their being, in a way no other species had ever conceived. They hadn't built machines. They had built gardens, and they had been the gardeners. Now the gardeners were gone, and the gardens were withering. So, Gorv said, his voice dangerously low, you can fix it. You are human. Your mind can. Day shook his head. I am one man. The gravity silk needed a choir of 200, perfectly synchronized. The quantum network requires thousands, spread like neurons across the galaxy. I can maybe, for a little while, keep a single relay on this station from failing. I cannot hold back the tide. He looked directly at the council, his expression grave. You are not looking for a missing fleet. You are looking for a missing heartbeat. And the body you have built for yourselves cannot live without it. The transmission ended. Day had work to do, a single relay on his home station to soothe. The silence in the chamber now was the silence of a diagnosis given, and it was terminal. They had not lost a supplier. They had lost a vital organ, and the patient was beginning to gasp. Go RV stared at the empty space where Day's face had been. His anger was gone, burned away by a cold, dawning dread. The humans had not fought a war. They had simply taken their souls with them when they left. And the galaxy, for all its advanced armor and proud empires, was just a corpse waiting to cool. Panic is a quiet thing at the highest levels. It does not scream. It whispers in the hurried meetings held in secure rooms, away from the public feeds. It shows in the tired eyes of leaders and the grim set of their mouths. The Galactic Council was in a state of quiet. Efficient panic. Engineer Day's revelation had spread through the leadership like a virus. The knowledge did not bring solutions. It only deepened the abyss of their problem. They were not suffering a technical failure. They were suffering a spiritual one. How do you repair that? Counselor Mira became the head of a new desperate committee, the Continuity Project. Its task was simple and impossible. Understand the full scope of human mediation and find a way to replace it. Day, under strict security, was brought to the Council's central archive. His presence was a fragile hope. He moved through the vast halls of data, a small, tired-looking man followed by towering Kiltok guards and the ever-watchful Mira. he did not work on fixing things. Instead, he began to unlock sealed human logs, files marked with low-priority codes that no one had ever bothered to access. They were maintenance logs, environmental reports, and engineering updates. Reading them was like watching a different galaxy. Log entry: Stardate 774.2, Cygnus X1 burst mitigation grid. Check complete. Contained gamma-ray burst divergence within acceptable parameters. Projected energy discharge redirected into feeding black hole. No sentient populations at risk. Next calibration in 5 standard years. Mira read the words again. A gamma-ray burst, capable of sterilizing a dozen star systems, had been quietly contained. It was listed as casually as a report on reactor temperature. She called up astronomical records for that region and date. There was a noted but unexplained gravitational wave anomaly. It had been classified as a natural phenomenon. It was not natural. It was gardening. Another log from a listening post in the galactic core. Psychic hive mind resonance at 0.3% threshold. Dampening field stable. Dreaming remains contained. Recommend continued monitoring. No intervention required. Day, Myra asked, her voice hushed. What is the dreaming in the core? Day didn't look up from the console. A latent consciousness. An old one. It sleeps. If it wakes, it would try to absorb all lesser minds into itself. A psychic singularity. Our people built a field to keep it dreaming. A lullaby. The archive was a mausoleum of quiet miracles. Humans had been shepherds of reality itself. They had slowed entropy decay in the power cores of key agricultural worlds, giving them centuries of extra bounty. They had woven stealth fields around pre-spaceflight civilizations, protecting them from predatory traders. They had even, in one log, polished the event horizon of a troublesome black hole to reduce its X-ray emissions. Saving a nearby aquatic species from extinction. Each entry was calm, technical, and utterly world-altering. The Council had seen humans as mechanics, good with tools. They were not mechanics. They were the architects of a stable, livable galaxy. And they had never asked for praise or payment. They had just done it. Go RV could not accept it. The scale of the deception, as he saw it, was monstrous. They made us look like children. He roared in a private session. They held our hand across every street, patting our heads, or they fought off monsters we couldn't even see. They asked for nothing, Mira countered, her own patience worn thin. They asked for everything. Gorv shot back. They asked for us to be helpless, to be forever in their debt. This was their plan all along, to make themselves irreplaceable so they could one day hold us hostage. It was then that a report came in. A deep-range Kiltak scout, searching for any trace of the human exodus, had found something. Not a ship, a station. A small, solitary human listening post on the very edge of Council-monitored space, near the galactic rim. Its beacon was faint, but it was active. Life signs. 1. Her name was Hannah. Records identified her as a former ambassador, a specialist in first contact and xenopsychology. She had been listed as on sabbatical for years. She had not left with the others. A retrieval mission was launched. It was Gorv's idea. He saw a prize, a high-value human to interrogate, to force for solutions. Mira saw a final chance to understand. The post was a simple, cold-weather module clinging to an icy asteroid. Hannah was waiting for them when they docked. She was older, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes carrying the same deep, unreadable calm that Jin's had. She wore simple clothes and offered the heavily armed Kiltak boarding team cups of tea. They refused. She smiled faintly and made one for herself. She was brought to the council chamber under guard. She stood where Jin had stood, looking at the assembled species, not with defiance or fear, but with a profound, weary sadness. Ambassador Hana, the Grand Speaker began, you will explain the departure of your species. You will provide any means to reverse the systemic failures. Hana took a slow breath. Her voice was soft, but carried to every corner. There is no means to reverse it. The gardener has left the garden. The plants will now grow wild, or they will die. That is the nature of things. Do not speak in riddles. Gorv demanded. Very well, Hana said, her eyes settling on him. You want a simple story. Here it is. For generations, my people heard a call, not a sound, a pull from beyond the galactic rim, a song of immense age and loneliness. We ignored it. We had work to do here. We built, we stabilized, we mediated. We became the pillars holding up a ceiling we did not build, for tenants who did not know they needed pillars. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The call grew stronger. It was a summons, a homecoming. We debated for a century, to go or to stay, to answer the call of our own mystery, or to remain as the silent guardians of yours. You chose to abandon your duty, Gorv accused. Our duty was a choice, Hana said firmly. One you never asked us to make. One you never knew we were making. We chose to leave because staying was a slow death for our spirit, and because we knew, with absolute certainty, that this council would never have let us go. You would have seen it as a threat to your stability. You would have tried to stop us, to keep your useful, primitive tools in their box. Her words hung in the air, undeniable in their truth. The council would have voted to quarantine humanity, to force them to maintain the systems they had built. So we left, Hana said, her shoulders slumping slightly. All at once. We dismantled the mental networks, the choirs, the lullabies. We closed our eyes so we could finally listen to the song calling us away. We took only ourselves. We left you everything we built. It is not our fault that what we built had pieces of our souls in it. Mira found her voice. The call, what was it? A genuine, sorrowful smile touched Hana's lips. We don't know. That is the point. To find out. To finally be the ones who explore, who wonder, who walk into the dark without knowing what is there. We have spent millennia being a light for others. Now, we go to see if there is a light for us. She looked around at the council, at Gorv's fury and Myra's dawning comprehension. You are not finished because we left. You are finished because you never learned to stand on your own. You leaned on a wall and called it strength. Now the wall is gone. You must learn to be your own wall, or you will fall. The truth, now fully spoken, was the most terrifying thing of all. There was no enemy to fight, no code to break. There was only a void where a crutch had been. And in that void, the galaxy finally heard the terrifying, empowering sound of its own uncertain heartbeat. The truth, once spoken, curdled. It did not bring unity. It brought a sharper, more desperate fear. Ambassador Hana's words were a diagnosis of a terminal illness. Some on the council, like Myra, heard a call to a difficult cure, self-reliance. But others, like Gorv and the Kiltak Alliance, heard only the sentence of death. And they would not go quietly. The idea was born in the secret war rooms of the Kiltak, far from the public council sessions. It was a weapon of last resort, born of panic and a refusal to accept the new reality. They called it Operation. Recall. Engineer Day learned of it first. He was working in a secured lab under the watchful eyes of both Tyrellian scientists and Kiltak guards. His task was hopeless, to try and replicate the neural hum using Tyrellian psychic dampeners. It was failing. A Tyrellian mind was like a soft chime. A human's was a sustained note. You could not build a symphony from chimes. He overheard the guards talking. They spoke of a facility, a Psi-Forge, left behind by humans. The Kill Tech had discovered it years ago in a derelict human research vessel. They had been trying to understand it, to weaponize it. It was not a weapon, Day knew. It was a medical tool, a last-ditch device for healing profound psychic trauma by broadcasting a stabilizing white noise pattern. In the wrong hands, it was a brain scrambler. They think they can modify it, Day whispered to Mara during one of her visits. His face was pale. They want to amplify its signal, not to heal, but to scream. A psychic scream across the void, targeted at the human exodus. To hurt them, to shock them, to force them to turn back. Mira felt a cold dread. That is insanity. Hannah said they answered a call. A scream of pain would not be a summons. It would be an attack. It will not just go out, Day said, his hands trembling as he worked on a relay node. The device is unstable. To amplify it that much, it will backflow. It will ripple through the latent psychic layers of the galaxy. It will be like poking a sleeping beast with a live wire. Mira went immediately to the council. She pleaded with Gorv, citing Day's warnings. Gorv listened, his armored face impassive. The engineer is one man, frightened and loyal to his departed people, Gorv stated. His fears are predictable. This sleeping beast is another human fairy tale, meant to keep us dependent and afraid. We will use their own tool to bring them to heel. They will return, and they will fix what they broke. The vote was not unanimous, but the Kiltak and their client species had the numbers. Operation Recall was authorized. Hannah, held in a secure suite, learned of the plan. She requested, then demanded, an audience. When they brought her to the chamber, her calm was gone, replaced by a fiery, urgent intensity. You cannot do this, she said, her voice cutting through the formalities. The device you have is a trauma amplifier. It was built to share pain, to dilute it among many minds for healing, to turn it outward with malicious intent. You have no idea what you will awaken. We are awakening your people to their responsibilities, Gorv replied coolly. You will awaken the dreaming. Hannah shouted, and the chamber fell silent at the raw terror in her voice. The consciousness in the galactic core. Our dampeners are failing. Its psychic shell is fragile. A massive, discordant scream like that will crack it wide open. It will wake up, and it will be hungry. It will consume every thinking mind it can reach, starting with yours. It was the same thing Day had said. The council was torn. Sun saw the risk. Gorv saw desperation and lies. Activate the device, he ordered. The Psi-Forge was deep in a shielded asteroid facility. The modified machine, crude and dangerous, hummed to life. Kiltech technicians, following stolen schematics, fed it power. The plan was to use Hannah as a focus, to use her human psychic signature to target the scream. She refused. They hooked her up to it against her will. On the council viewer, they saw the machine power up. They saw Hannah strapped to a chair, her body rigid, her eyes wide with fear and fury. They heard the low, building whine that made every species in the chamber clutch their heads in sudden, sharp pain. Stop this. Myra cried. Look at the core sensors. A secondary screen flickered. Readings from the galactic core, stable for millennia, were spiking. The gentle, sleeping resonance of the dreaming was becoming agitated, spiking into jagged, wakeful patterns. It was too late. The Kiltech technician pushed the final sequence. The amplified scream was not a sound. It was a silent, psychic tsunami. It burst from the forge. For a millisecond, there was nothing. Then, the backflow hit. Every being on the asteroid felt it. A feedback loop of pure, distorted anguish the galaxy's own latent fears and pain, amplified and reflected. The kill-tech technicians screamed, clawing at their own heads. The equipment exploded in a shower of sparks, and in the core, the dreaming woke up. It was not a sudden invasion. It was a slow, cold tide, a wave of psychic negation, a hunger that consumed thought and replaced it with a numb, echoing silence. It spread through the subspace layers, the very layers human technology had used. Worlds near the core went silent first. Not destroyed, quiet, ships stopped responding. Cities fell still. The minds within were not dead. They were absorbed, empty. Panic turned to pure, unadulterated terror. The kill-tech fleet, pride of the Alliance, moved to engage the spreading wave of silence. There was nothing to shoot. The wave passed through them. Ship after ship winked out on the tracker, becoming silent, drifting tombs. Gorv stood in the council chamber, watching his civilization unravel in real time. The weapon had failed. It had not brought back the humans. It had unleashed the very monster they had guarded against. His arrogance lay around him in ruins. In the asteroid facility, amidst the smoke and the cries of the mind-broken, Hana stirred. The machine was dead. The crude connections had burned out. She was free. She stumbled to a console, her mind ringing with the aftermath of the scream and the cold, gathering hunger of the awakened dreaming. She knew what she had to do. There was a final protocol. Not a weapon. Not a call. A truth. A human device, left in thousands of locations across the galaxy, simple, robust beacons, separate from the failing network. Their function was single and final. With shaking hands, her vision blurred from pain, she input the code. Not to the council. To the beacons. In the council chamber, as they watched the silent tide spread, a new signal overrode all channels. It was not a message from Hana. It was a raw data burst, repeating on every frequency, public and secure. It contained everything. The logs of human mediation, the recordings of Day's explanation, Hana's warning about the dreaming, the Council's vote for Operation Recall, the sensor feeds of the kill-tech fleet being consumed. It was not an accusation. It was a diagnosis, delivered to every citizen, every species, every child on every world. The truth in its entirety, without spin or politics. The truth of their dependence, their folly, and the monster they had unleashed. The galaxy saw its protectors leave. It saw its leaders fail. And now it saw the darkness coming, and knew exactly who had opened the door. On the screen, Hana's face appeared one last time, pale but steady. She did not speak to the council. She spoke to everyone. "The gardeners are gone," she said, her voice clear. "The fence is down. The wolves are inside. Now you must learn to be shepherds, or you will be sheep. The choice, finally, is yours." The transmission ended. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It was the silence of a galaxy holding its breath, staring into the abyss it had created, and knowing, for the first time, that no one was coming to save it. The broadcast did not bring immediate unity. In some places, it brought riots. In others, a crushing, silent despair. The Galactic Council, as an institution, shattered. Gorv was recalled by his own people in disgrace, his faction collapsing under the weight of its catastrophic error. The Kill-Tak Alliance retreated, a wounded giant licking its wounds and facing internal rebellion. For a few cycles, it seemed the end would be not with a bang, but with a whimperous slow, quiet absorption by the spreading psychic silence they called the dreaming. But Hana's final words had planted a seed in the fertile soil of desperation. The choice, finally, is yours. The first to act were not the great empires, but the small. A Torellian research outpost, led by Myra, sent out an open signal. They had been working with Engineer Day. They could not replicate the human home, but they had been studying the failing systems. They proposed a radical idea. Instead of trying to mimic human technology, they would build something new. Something built not for one species, but by many. A network of diverse minds and machines, a patchwork shield. Day, freed from Kiltech custody, became their chief advisor. He was no longer a prisoner or a curiosity. He was a teacher, and he taught them the first human lesson: understand the problem. He showed them the harmonics of the dreaming's hunger, a frequency of pure consumption. "We cannot fight the ocean," he said, his voice tired but firm in the small, crowded lab. "But we can learn to sail on it, or to build a wall against the tide. We need a different song." The HFY, masters of fluid dynamics and collective consciousness, offered a solution. Their minds worked in unison easily. They could not produce the sustained note of the human, but they could create a complex shifting pattern, a psychic corkscrew that might deflect the consuming waves. The Velen, ancient and slow, who communicated through magnetic pulses, found they could emit a grounding frequency, a psychic anchor to stabilize space around a small area. It was clumsy. It was inefficient. A human choir of 200 could calm a nebula. It took 10,000 HFY, 5,000 Velen, and 100 Turelian coherence amplifiers to protect a single star system. And it was exhausting. They could not hold it forever. But they could hold it for a while. The first successful test was a beacon of hope brighter than any sun. The colony of New Hope, directly in the path of the dreaming's tide, was scheduled for silence. The Patchwork Alliance gathered. HFY immersers floated in connection tanks. Velen pulsed in deep chambers. Turelian technicians, led by Myra, monitored the chaotic, beautiful data stream. Day stood at the center, not as a conductor, but as a translator, helping each species understand the other's part. The silent wave came. It was a pressure in the mind, a cold vacuum trying to suck out thought. The patchwork shield activated. It was not a smooth wall. It was a shimmering, kaleidoscopic barrier of 1,000 different psychic colors, a chaotic harmony. The wave hit it and splintered. It flowed around the system, like water around a rough stone. New Hope remained. Its people were terrified, but they were themselves. They had not been saved by a greater power. They had saved themselves. Together. The example spread. It was not a unified government. It was an alliance of necessity, a coalition of the willing. They called it the Remnant. They shared technology openly, something the old council had never done. Kiltok armor designs were merged with HFY hydro shields. Turelian sensors were wired into Velen tectonic plates for power. They built not for elegance, but for survival. Their ships were ugly, patchwork things, but they worked. They learned to fight the dreaming, not with weapons, but with existence. They learned that its hunger was simple. It consumed passivity, silence, and fear. Complex, active, collective thought was a knot it could not easily swallow. A planet singing 1,000 different songs of life was harder to digest than a quiet one. A year passed. The dreaming's advance had been slowed, then halted along a ragged, contested frontier. The galaxy was scarred. Whole regions were silent, forever lost. The old order was gone, but in its place was something raw, real, and fiercely alive. On the edge of known space, near the icy asteroid where Hana had been found, a small, sleek human vessel floated, cloaked and silent. It had been there all along. Its sole occupant was named Min. Their purpose was not to intervene, but to witness. To see if the patient lived or died, Min watched the data streams from the Remnant. They saw the ugly, beautiful ships. They read the frantic, hopeful communications. They observed the first council of the Remnant, where Mira, now a leader not by title but by respect, stood alongside an Aquar choirmaster and a Veln elder. There were no ornate pods. They stood on a simple platform, speaking plainly. Min's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. It was not the smile of a parent watching a child take a first step. It was the smile of a fellow traveler, seeing someone else find the path out of a deep woods. They prepared a final report. A single burst transmission aimed not at the galaxy, but in the direction the human exodus had gone. It contained no advice, no judgment. Just data, images of the patchwork shields, the schematics of the first remnant ship. The speech from Miradot, the message was simple. They are building their own song. It is off-key. It is loud. It is theirs. Min powered down the observation post. Their work was done. The galaxy was not finished. It was just beginning. It was bruised. It was poorer. It was wiser. It had looked into the abyss, and instead of waiting for a savior, had begun clumsily to build a bridge across it. The human vessel turned, its engines humming a quiet, familiar tune. It slipped into the void, heading for the rim, to follow the song of its people. Behind it, in the dark, the galaxy glittered not with the steady, perfect light of human-made stability, but with the frantic, brilliant, and defiant sparkle of countless species fighting for their own dawn. They were not finished. They were just getting started.